like, okay, you guys own businesses.
Yeah.
And you have families.
Yeah.
How do you make the decision of which is right? Like,
Yeah.
where should I be right now?
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people that are in
Yeah.
the chat are in a similar situation of
Yeah.
Yeah.
how do we make that decision?
Wow.
Yeah, I'll give you the introduction.
Yeah.
and,
Let's.
Yeah.
and sort of kick things off a
Yeah.
little bit. So, you know, I met my wife in Singapore, and she is from Tokyo and graduated from university. She went to Australia for university, and while she was in university, her parents relocated to Singapore, and he worked in manufacturing for a long time. And so they finally, kids were out of the house, and so they all moved together. My Baba and Gigi now that moved to Singapore, and my wife graduated college. She had nowhere to go, so she moved to Singapore. And then a few years later, I moved to Singapore, and we met. She'd been there for 10 years before we met.
Oh,
and
wow, okay.
I'd been there for, maybe 6 years by that time.
Okay.
And then COVID hit, and it became a really small island in Singapore really, really fast. And so we were like, we got to go somewhere else. And during that time, we kind of scoured the map of Japan of where we wanted to go. We were kind of looking for a year off, doing something different. I was teaching at international schools. And I hope to come back and talk about education a little bit.
Sure.
I'd love to hear your experiences as parents doing that. And so, yeah, we looked around the map, and a friend of a friend kind of was like, hey, you should really check out Fukuoka. And I was like, yeah, let me look at it. And so Google Maps, spent a lot of time on Google Maps. And I was like, wait, let's go check it out. So we came 2 times to visit.
Mm-hmm.
The first time, kind of didn't know what we were doing. We stayed out in Mamochi near the beach, and it was useless to kind of get around and see things. And then we came back a couple of months later and stayed more in the center of town. Her parents came, and they kind of looked around, and then we ran into Ohori Park, and I'm like, oh, I want to live here. Like so our children are 3 and 5, and so they would have been 1.5 and 3 at the time, and so we were like, this just looks like the kind of place. If we live close to here, we can come here every day and
Perfect
kick
park.
around. And then I meet you, Duncan.
Yeah, that's right. In the park.
in
the park,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I was like, oh. And so, yeah, it was a good tradition or transition for us. We were ready to kind of move out of Singapore. The cost of life was pretty high, and that wasn't really the big problem. I think the problem was just seeing my friends' kids go through the experiences of living in Singapore as their parents are either American or mixed families, and they live in Singapore. And yeah, sure, there's a couple of families. The father or the mother is Singaporean, but there's a lot of interracial marriages in Singapore. And one of my friends, like, my kid doesn't even know where he is. Like, is he a Kiwi? Is he an American because he goes to American school? Is he Singaporean? And so we kind of figured at some point we need to kind of cut that equation a little bit of like, if there's 3 places, let's just cut it to 2. And, you know, and then it was, are our kids going to ever really be able to talk to their grandparents if we don't come here? And yeah, we decided let's just go for it. And so very happily quit my job. And we moved here a couple of months later. And, you know, then it's not easy to move to Japan. I've heard you guys talk about it and talk to a lot of people about, you know, you need a phone to get a bank, you need a bank to get a house, you need a house to get a phone. You go in that triangle, and you're like, thankfully my wife was able to, you know, cut that and say, hey, like, all right, now we can get into that cycle. And so we moved here about 1.5 years ago in June. And it still took us 6 weeks to find a place to live because we didn't have a job. We didn't have you know, she has bank accounts, but they're in Tokyo.
Right.
And it was kind of tricky. And then, a couple months into that, we finally got a place. We're kind of settled and go to the park and meet Duncan, crushing an English class there. It was, I spent 25 years teaching. And seriously, to watch you do that with those kids and the way you did it, I was like, I can't do this. They've asked me a few times to come and do it, and I'm like, no, he set too high of a standard.
Oh yeah, wow. Yeah.
So I was like, no, that is not something that I think I can do.
A lot of practice.
Yeah.
A lot of practice.
Yeah, it was good. It was good. The kids were singing and dancing.
Yeah.
And so then when you passed me your number, I was like, yeah, that's cool, yeah. And you're like, hey, I'm doing a podcast. I had a big chuckle. I told you guys this. That I was like, oh, here's another couple of guys with a podcast. Let's see how it is. And so I sat on it for a couple of weeks, and then I was going for a walk and leaving. I'm like, I'm done with all my podcasts. I got nothing. My wife's like, oh, what about the Dad's Club? I'm like, all right, I'll give it a shot. And I've told both of you guys separately.
Yeah.
It was very good. It was very. I appreciate it. I appreciate what you do. I mentioned you when we met. That first episode was getting into the life experience of people and dads, young dads, and we all saw ourselves. I saw myself in that. What would I do in that situation? You haven't listened. It's a plug to go back and listen. And I hadn't gotten 20 minutes into my walk, and I was like, wow, that's good. And then subsequently keeping to listening to the podcast. I think I'm probably one of the few that's listened to all of them.
Yes, thank you. Much appreciated.
But no, I really, it's the human experience. It's the human experience in a place that's new to me, that gives me an opportunity to hear what it's like for you guys who've been here for a long time, who developed long-lasting relationships to the location and to the people here. And, knowing now my situation, obviously, I can't get out of the house and go hang out and meet people like I used to. It's been very, very good and refreshing for me to be like, hey, there's a lot of people out there doing really interesting things in our neighborhood. Yep. And so I'm a big fanboy of the work you guys have done, and really appreciate you guys take the time, effort, the setup to make that happen. And I know, it's hard, and I know it takes a lot of time. Yep. I actually don't know how long it takes, because video editing is not something I know how to do, but I can tell it's been effort, and I just really appreciate you guys doing it. Oh, man. And also a lot of the people that come on here, I'm always appreciative, and I've reflected on this the year and a half that I haven't been teaching. What I enjoyed about teaching was really watching people struggle with things and succeed, and struggle and succeed, and struggle and succeed. And I hear that in a lot of the conversations we have here and on our chat, of people trying different things, and they're struggling, they're achieving, they keep going, they keep working on things, and it's so great to just see people go to places they never thought they were going to go, and break through it. And so coming here today, I was like, I never thought you guys would have this kind of setup, and so I'm super impressed, and I appreciate it. And so and well, I could keep going.
No, thank you.
We can get into the other things you guys have talked about on the podcast, and I just am really thankful that you guys do it.
Great.
Oh, well, thank you, man.
Sorry for the long-winded.
Really appreciate hearing that, because there's a lot of times that I feel doubt about putting in the effort. Is it worth it? I mean, for us, I know it's always been worth it, because it's been that time we get to hang out. But beyond that, is it worth it for anybody else? And so hearing stories like yours, I very much appreciate it. Thank you.
And I think what you said at the beginning is, we feel that a little bit about podcasts as well. I mean, it's such a everyone's got a fucking podcast.
Oh,
right?
This guy now.
So right. And it took a while to sort of be like, I want to do one, but what would we do it about, right? And thankfully, Joel, had the idea, and I was like, like I think that's good, and like that's it's niche enough, and it's something that I feel we can actually. In some ways have some not qualification, but something knowledge to talk about.
Can I flip the script a little bit and kind of ask questions that I've wondered listening to the podcast,
by all means,
about your relationship in that. Like you've been here for 16 years, Joel. How long?
Fukuoka was 13 years.
13 years, and you guys met at
through work.
Yeah.
We were working for the same company, but not at the same location. So we'd meet up at training and like the end of year party.
But yeah, no, it took us many years to actually get to know each other, you know? Like, it wasn't instantaneous.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've said this before, but it was one of those things where you went to the work thing and there were genuinely people you wanted to see there. There are other people that are like, okay, their work friends are okay. And then there are other people like, oh, they're going to be there. Oh, no, okay. So obviously we would spend quite a lot of time at those things talking. And I would always feel, that guy's cool. I should hang out with him outside of outside of these work things. And then the next time I would see you would be at another work thing. Like, why didn't I get in touch? I've been meaning to call. Yeah, I've been meaning to call you. Oh, shit. And then I think we finally did it. And yeah.
How do you find that now that like you're busy? Meeting people in Japan is never easy.
Yeah, we just were talking about that. Yeah.
Great tie-in.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, definitely once the kids come along, you know. I mean, I think I've said this before, but I was I wasn't expecting to be living here married with kids. And when I was younger and single, you know, I would see some older guys here in Japan with families, and they didn't seem so happy. You know, they're propping the bar up in the early hours, looking at some 20-year-old or something. Like, oh no, is that the future of a dad in Japan? But then, of course, when I had kids and I was not at the bar in the early hours, well, not as often as I used to be, and hanging out in parks. And then there's all these other dads, international dads, that I'd never seen before. And the reason I didn't see them is because they're having their, you know, nice family life. So, it definitely becomes a little more tricky to sort of be out and about and meeting new people, right? Which again is why we thought having some kind of community, not that that's gone as well as we hoped, the meetups.
It's
but
done
I think,
something though. I mean,
to me, I think just knowing that there was people having those experiences, like I knew I couldn't do it. I knew if I'm not at home, something's bad gonna happen. Somebody's gonna cry. So I'm like, all right, that's cool. I'll watch my YouTube. But like just to hear the stories you guys have shared and knowing that the other people are doing things and seeing their work, I was like, I can live vicariously through a lot of people versus just living in my small, place that I live with my family. And so, again, very supportive and happy for what you guys have done.
Thank you. It's very awesome to hear that. Thank
you.
So,
Danny, you did actually start family life living in Singapore. What's that like? A lot of expat families getting together and...
Well, it was tough during the COVID years.
Oh, right.
So we had our kids, and Singapore was on lockdown. Right. So our son was 6 months old, and the society stopped for a good 7-8 months.
Right.
You couldn't really do much. You had... I met a woman in the park the other day at Ohori Park, and she lived in Singapore through the same experience. And she reminded me that every shop you had to go in, you had to scan a QR code when you went in to every location, so they could check later who was contaminated by the person who showed up with COVID.
The clusters.
And like I completely blocked that memory from myself. And so, then, by the time our kid was 2, we moved into an apartment we'd never seen before because you couldn't go to apartment listings. They wouldn't allow people to come in. But thankfully, we moved into an apartment that was kind of blocked off from the streets, and all the kids were playing in the courtyard.
Nice.
I was like, oh, finally he has friends, right? Like they're people. And so we met a good community of people there. And, in Singapore, which is different than here, is that people have helpers. And so we were in a situation where like, let's get a helper, right? It's not breaking the bank. We'll do it. And it was good. It was great, but it was sort of like, are we outsourcing parenting? Like, isn't this our job?
Right.
And we came here, my wife and I kind of laughed a couple of times of like, well, our kid's 3. Is he really behaving like this? Did we not know that this is how the 3-year-old behaved? Because it was very easy in the afternoons to be like, our helper was fantastic. We're still in touch with her. Our kids, they think that she's family.
That's great.
Yeah, they both. Yeah, it's like, we can go see our family in Singapore and back home in the States. And so it was great. She's a very, very lovely person. But at time I was like, wait, this isn't this isn't how I was raised. This isn't.
Mm.
I don't know how to handle this. I don't know. My wife, obviously, we didn't know how to handle it, and so it was actually in my mind. It was one of the reasons we left, because I was like, it's too easy to not do this, and so it's been better, I think, for me as a father to. Yeah, I'll wake up 6 o'clock. I have to wake up when you wake up at 6 o'clock.
Right.
No one else is going to cut the banana for you. I got to go and do it. And so, yeah, it's one of those things. And I think a lot of people in Singapore, they do get raised by their helper. And how's that impact them? And we just were like, hey, let's just cut this out. We don't. And then a lot of my good friends there, like, they don't have helpers. It's not a thing, but it's certainly within the middle class, people having someone come and work for you.
It's pretty common.
Yeah, it's very common. Every house in Singapore has, a small room for the helper.
Right.
Yeah.
So with that on your mind, you made pretty much a conscious decision to move out of Singapore because of that, or is there more reasons? Or
Yeah, it was COVID, got small real quick.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're at a job for 13 years. You've seen the good sides, you've seen the bad sides, you've seen good bosses, you've seen bad bosses, and you realize it's maybe I don't need to do this anymore. And so I was kind of in a situation where I worked a bunch of summers and made more money than I probably should have during those summers. And that was like, all right, we have bandwidth, we have a runway of a year or two to go and live somewhere else, kind of like your friend, sailing around the world.
Yeah.
So for our level of adventure is moving to Fukuoka. Your friend has a much different level of tolerance for risk and adventure than we do. But I was like, wow, I guess we're kind of on a similar journey. Let's just we're done. We're moving. We're going to establish ourselves as a family. Nobody's working, and see how it goes. And it was the best move for at least the first year, because our kid, he told me one time, you'll appreciate this. I don't like school because I'm English. I'm like, bro, you're from Cleveland. Like, now his Japanese is better than mine. So.
How long have you guys been here for?
So we've been here for 17 months, 18 months.
Oh,
so
wow.
A year and a half.
Wow.
I lived in Sapporo 25 years ago. I'm right out of college. I got a job teaching in Hokkaido.
Oh, wow.
So I spent 3 years in Hokkaido and then moved to China, Philippines, went back to the States, moved to India, spent a couple of years in India, and then moved to Singapore. It's been a long time, most of my career in Singapore, and then was like, all right, let's do something different.
It sounds like you have a pretty high level of adventure as well.
Not anymore.
No.
Yeah.
Well,
a couple
kids,
of
right?
too many.
And was in all those countries, was that doing teaching?
Yeah, so I taught at the international schools at
Right.
all of those places, and it was a good adventure.
Yeah.
I met a lot of fantastic people, a lot of great experiences.
Yeah.
And but I wonder about teaching. So I go to my kids' Yochien, his kindergarten. I wonder what goes on as a teacher there. Like if they had gone, so my son went to school with us for a year in Singapore, so I took him to school every day.
Oh, to the international school where you were working, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So he got a year of the experience. He loved it. It was great teachers. But I knew all the teachers. I knew their backstories. I knew what they were like, and I knew them as people. Whereas here, you just kind of know your teachers, but you don't really know your teachers. And so it's been a transition for me of, like, I would have known, all right, who are the good teachers? Who are the bad teachers? Why are they good? Why are they bad? We could have made those decisions about that. And now to kind of just sit back and trust the process. Like, I don't know. I know there's a curriculum now because I've observed it for a year and a half. And I'm like, okay, they do have a good plan. But A, I'm not going to try to impact it. I would have no impact if I did try to impact it. And B, how would I understand it enough to do that? And so I do think of the difference between parents back home from, your experiences at the PTA meetings back in Canada.
Thanks for remembering that.
I was like, well, I don't go to the PTA meetings. Thankfully, my wife does that for me. But
Yeah.
it's like I wouldn't have an impact even if I did go. And I don't even think. Yeah, and then I look at it from when I was working in schools. The boss doesn't want to hear it. Just leave them alone. Let them do what they want to do.
Yeah.
And
Did-
so yeah.
Did you consider the international school here, having had that background in that world? No.
You know, yeah, I mean, we're going to take this part out, but I don't know much about the school here.
Right.
I could articulate more about, like this is maybe something you can't keep, but like international schools around the world are all different. They're all based on the clientele of the community. And so, I mean, tragically, right? So I failed to mention, I did work for 6 months in Dakar in Senegal. And when I was in Senegal, the USAID did a fantastic softball tournament. It was the one thing I think the U.S. government ever did that I saw was a nice thing for people. And I love my country most of the time. But like to see this past couple of weeks where the USAID is just getting decimated.
Right.
I'm like, oh, that was the one thing. They took a bunch of people that were on the Peace Corps, making no money, sleeping on basketball courts in Mauritania, and they brought them all together for a weekend of partying. And
wow.
To see that all go away. So back to the international schools. The school in Senegal was, an aid school. It was people that helped, people who cared about the community. In India, it's finance, right? So it's a community of finance people. And so the ethos and the mentality of the school board is going to reflect who goes to the school.
Right.
And I don't know enough about the school here in Fukuoka to know who are the power players that are kind of dictating who does it, but it will definitely reflect the community. Like the school in Nepal, I've only been there a few times, but yeah, they're similar to Dakar, and it's all a bunch of missionaries or community workers and things like that. And so,
I mean, I thought what was interesting right at the beginning was how you said you wanted the kids to be at least dealing with 2 countries in their life than 3. So I wondered whether also the decision was, well, we're here in Japan, they are Japanese, they should go to the Japanese school.
Yeah. I don't know enough. I mentioned this when we spoke earlier that like right now, I love where our kids are at. They're sponges. They're picking it up so well. Like they're talking to their mom and using words I don't even know. And now he's reading. Like he doesn't even read in English yet. But he was like, oh yeah, he said something the other day, and I was like, oh, buddy, slow down here, man. Like, you're not supposed to learn. And then, like, whenever they learn too much, I bop them on the head, like, because I'm like, hey, stop growing, stop learning. We don't need that. Stay a kid forever.
Yeah.
And so he loves it. And so I don't know enough about. So I do reflect on, like, okay, if it was an American school, if he was going to school in the States, I would know the good school districts. I would know which ones are not the good school districts. I don't know any of that here. And so I'd love to hear more about kind of your experiences and really kick off a conversation in the chat of these are the things that are what you would look for to be like, all right, this school's okay versus this school. And, I spent my career in the industry and I don't know.
Yeah.
I can, I'll point out one thing that I know for sure from my kids' school that we picked out specifically because of this and location is there's no PTA in at my kids' school. So that means you don't have to get involved in all the little things you got to do when you're in the PTA, which, join the meetings, fill out the notes or whatever. There's a lot of responsibilities. So I've heard at other schools, but this particular school doesn't have one. So I hear a lot of different parents say, oh, I'm so thankful for there not being a PTA. It's, the last school we went to had it and so much to do. It takes up so much of your time. And so that is one thing I can point out to as a good thing to look out for. No PTA.
So my wife was talking to a friend yesterday, and she said that at her kid, the daughter's 2, goes to like a little school, and they were like no parent line groups.
Yeah.
Is that the same sort of thing? Like,
I don't know if there's a hard and fast rule for that, but
it's on a similar thing.
Yeah. It's like things are a little bit more flexible and less formal at this. It's kind of a what do you call them? A like an example school, isn't there a word for that? Like
Model.
Yeah. It's the one my kid goes to is a model school for, I don't know what, maybe it's in Fukuoka or Kyushu or something. But yeah, it's been nice how there's very little stuff you have to get involved in. So I appreciate that. Maybe some people, I'd like, when I was back in Canada, I wanted to know more, actually. You know, like what's going on in the neighborhood. I want to like find out the ins and outs and who does what and, you know, make connections. But there isn't much of that at this school my kid goes to. I don't know, how about your...
Yeah, I mean, I think and I'm not an expert or anything. I think you're basically governed to, certainly when it's elementary school, you're governed to go in the area that you live in. So there was no big thing about us having to choose a school. It was always going to be the local one, right?
Yeah.
And then I've heard that's basically how it is. Then of course you've got the private option, which is different. I used to work at a school that's connected to the University of Education. There's one of them here in Fukuoka. There's one in Kurume. There's one in Kokura. They are a little bit different because they have a lot of teachers going in there to like their first placement after they finish. Actually, they come and do a placement and then they go back and finish their studies. So young, new teachers. Also, a lot they seem to cycle around like, oh, you go and try something new here. So that had a bit of a different vibe to it. Then there are a couple of what are they called? Like nature schools here. There's a mountain school and there's a sea school. The sea school's on Nokonoshima, and the mountain one is up somewhere there. And a friend of mine his kids went there for a while, but the whole school's very small. So it's kind of 3 years in one class and there's about 12 kids. So, yeah, interesting. Certainly different to the 40 kids in the class, but it really matters if you get on with those those kids. And then, I suppose the other option is obviously the international school here in Fukuoka, and then there's also Linden Hall.
I don't know much about that school.
No.
So I want to hear a little bit more about like high school decisions and middle school decisions.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, honestly, that's where I'm going to start looking to get some help because so far, I mean, so daughter's in her third year, coming to the end of her third year, and son's coming to the end of his second year. So we've got a pretty good experience now, halfway through almost of elementary school. It's all been good. I mean, there's been some problems, but I kind of think elementary school's fine. Like, I think some things about them, they're not in uniform. They seem to really, this is more, you're young and it's fun. It doesn't seem to be getting too regimented. But junior high school, that shit ramps up, definitely. Those dark black uniforms go on, the clubs start, the juku starts, all of this stuff. So that's when I'm really we will start at the local one for sure. Let's hope it goes smooth. But I'm already thinking, well, what if it doesn't? What if it doesn't work for one or either of them or both of them? What are the options then? Because private, I think, is the same kind of shit, but you just pay for it.
How many years are we talking about down the line? Like from now?
3 from now.
3 from now. Oh, okay. Huh. I was thinking,
you're closer, no?
Yeah, so we're talking about the transition to junior high, right?
Yep.
Yeah, that's coming up pretty fast, but I don't know. I still feel like anything can happen, like 6 months or a year.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know. It's hard to look 2 or 3 years down the line right now. It's just for whatever reason. But I know we have to be because we got to make a move to the junior high school for the kid. And where's that going to be? Where are we going to live? Are we going to move? And you're moving and he's never coming back.
I'm coming back.
Where's your wife from, Dan?
She was born in Abina and grew up now she lives in Machida.
Oh, okay.
Outside Tokyo.
Machida.
So
Tokyo. Oh,
I mean, I was going to ask that. Did that come under consideration when you decided to move back to Japan? Did you look at Tokyo?
We did, of course.
Yeah.
And sometimes we think we should have moved there, or sometimes we're glad we didn't. But it kind of came down to the decision of we could live in Tokyo. It's where's the nature? Where's the ocean? Where's the mountains? Where's
Right.
you know, we were hoping to go to baseball games, but our kids go to sleep too early, so we can't go. Even though we could walk to the stadium, we've been a few times on Sunday afternoon games, so we don't get to enjoy that as much as we hope to. Yeah, it was kind of the decision of like, hey, Fukuoka has most of what we want, and it's closer.
Yeah.
Than if we needed to go. Like, you can get to the beach in Tokyo, but everyone's going to the beach in Tokyo. It's hard to get to. You can get to the mountains, but everyone's going to the mountains the same time as you want to go to the mountains. And so, yeah, but you know, Fukuoka gets small pretty quick too. You know, I recently got on my bike and was like, it's just repetitive streets over and over and over again. The bike path, okay, it's nice, but you know, I don't got 50 kilometers in me to go to the mountains yet. So it's like, I don't have that much time either.
Sure.
So, yeah.
I mean, I suppose one of the possible advantages of if you had chosen Tokyo would have been some connections, right? From friends and family and stuff.
More so for my wife.
Yeah.
But, you know, interesting what you say about the PTA. I think my wife has found her community here through the school and through not the PTA, but you know, just getting together with the parents. It's Yochien, right? It's not
the Mamatomos.
Yeah, and so I think for really the first time, she fits in with people that are like her. Whereas in Singapore, she had a bunch of Singaporean friends, but they get together, they talk Chinese, and she understood, but she couldn't really communicate with them. Whereas now she's a part of that community. And so, you know, it's interesting. And this is another topic I'd love to talk about in this forum. Our friend has a daughter that's 3 and another one that's 2. And they send the 2-year-old to international, like Yochien, but she's the only biracial kid in the school.
Wow.
Whereas at the Yochien that we send our kids to next year, my daughter's going to have 11 different kids that are biracial. And so I'm wondering, you know, we see all the TikToks nowadays about kids that grew up here 20 years ago. And I'm wondering if that's changing, of like, hey, there's just so many more expats and foreigners and mixed families here that the whole stereotype of Hafu, it might be going away just because there's just so many of them. And maybe that's just my wishful thinking for my children. But I see it at our, you know, at our school. There's an Australian kid in there. Her Japanese is crushing it, and I'm just like, whoa. She doesn't even talk to me in English. Like, I don't even understand what she's saying half the time, and I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, good. Let's see you tomorrow. And she's 4.
Yeah. I mean, that is quite a striking number, 11.
Out of 33.
Yeah, because I mean, certainly in my time of working in Yochiens, Japanese Yochiens, once or twice I would meet a mixed kid. So that 11, that's a change. That's a change. Yeah. And is that? Would you say does that Yochien do anything that appeals to mixed families, or?
I really don't know. I think, I don't think so.
Okay.
Yeah, I met a guy in my building, and he said, "Oh yeah, I sent my older son there," and he said he loved it. Like, Japanese guy, Japanese family, and yeah, I think it's just the nature of the school. You know, it's one of those mud dirt playgrounds, and kids, you know, they get sick, they get dirty, and we love it. When we came here, we were looking at a bunch of schools, and we went to one of these schools with a nice AstroTurf field. I'm like, no, we're not going here. We just came from that. Like, there were no bugs. Like, our kids were never picking up. But we lived in Singapore, right? There's bugs everywhere. Scared of geckos. And so coming here, he's picking up worms. And we love that.
Nice. And just going back again, Dan, I wanted to ask this earlier. So I really get it, you know, taking the countries of the family down to 2 instead of 3, and you chose Japan. Did the States ever come up in consideration?
Ah, man, not really. No. Like, I don't like the car culture of the U.S. of like you need a car to get anywhere, and even when we're back home, it's a big hassle because. Yeah, we got to get baby seats for the kids now, and we just go from here to there. And you know, my wife doesn't have a driver's license, so she'd be stuck in the house. And then you look at, okay, what cities, Vancouver would be a great place to live if you don't have a car. But you could do it.
Yeah. Sure.
Okay,
You could
I was
do
there
it.
20 years ago. Maybe,
No,
yeah.
I mean you're right. You could. It's got a well enough established transportation system, but Canada's a big place. You want to go further afield, you need a car because there's no reliable like farther afield transportation. But yeah, no. So the car culture in the States, interesting to hear that. Nothing else like.
No, I mean,
Or that's the first thing that came to your mind when you thought of why not America. So no, it's just
no,
interesting to hear.
because I know my wife can't drive,
Hmm.
and I was like, well, it's not a starter, so we don't even think about it.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, sure, yeah. There's a million reasons
Yeah.
if you want to get me going.
Yeah, no. It's like don't poke
Especially
the bear.
the last couple of weeks, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's a different place. I do think maybe there is some reflection on my behalf of like, hey, would my wife have enjoyed the experience I'm having as living in a different culture if she lived in the States?
Mm-hmm.
Her sister lives in LA. Her sister's husband works in the industry in LA, and so yeah, there is some connection there. But we really didn't think about it. I don't think. I don't know. My brothers have kids, and this is why I think about the education. My brother sends his kids to private schools in the States, and they're both crushing it. And so I'm like, hey, is my philosophy right now correct? Of kids will turn out fine. I taught for 25 years. I've seen a lot of kids. They all turned out fine. They were good. They were bad kids. They all kind of turned out fine.
Mm-hmm.
And so just let the process go. But then I see my brother's kids, and I'm like, oh, they're kind of crushing it. Maybe I should intervene and change the process a little bit. And that's where I'd love to hear from other people their experiences of.
That's a really good thing to bring up there because you're talking about basically the differences between private and public schools, right?
In some ways, yeah.
And I'll speak from my nephew's experience of having seen them go through private schools in different countries. They turned out really like top-notch kids. And I don't know,
Would they have turned out top-notch kids anyways?
Yeah.
Yes, but they might not have learned as much. I kind of feel that's the thing. I don't know. Maybe it's just my perception. Like and I know some private school teachers as well. They're very well educated teachers who are passionate about what they do, and that comes across in the lessons and in their personality. And you pick the cream of the crop from teachers. Is if you got a good teacher, you're probably going to have good students. It's up to the teacher to kind of control the flow of the classroom. So if you've got a good, well-balanced teacher who's dedicated, then I think that makes all the difference. And you go to a public school somewhere in the States, I can't even imagine, right? I know in Canada, like you go to a public school, it's like, oh, great. Like I got Jimmy and Tony over there and they got a whole bag of shit going on at home, and you don't get the same kind of problems. And, that's like a social class issue as well. And I guess if we're just talking about public and private, then private's probably going to turn out a better kid based on the fact that they have good teachers.
So this is one of the things I don't have an answer to. And I've always kind of wondered if the experiences of teacher kids at schools is different from parents who work for organizations who pay the tuition for those kids to go to that private school. And like watching my friends' kids go through school, it's a very different experience than, some of the families in Singapore had everything they could imagine. And so, to have kids go on a school trip and be like, this is the first time I've ever flown coach.
Yeah.
Right? Like that's a different experience. And so I don't know. I don't know the answer to this. And I really want to learn more about what are private schools in Japan like versus the private schools that I worked at, and I think your nephews went to.
Yep.
And I'm like, I think I really don't know.
Well, let's talk about this then, because I found this for me was upside down when I first learned this. So high school, they most students will take 2 tests. they'll take the one for the public school that they want to go to, and then and they can only do it that because it's all schools on the same day. So you choose that school, you can't take it for another school.
Right.
So you choose your one public school, state school that you're going to go to, and then as a backup on another day, you take an exam for a private high school, and you tend to choose a private high school that is below what you think you're going to get, or that you're safely going to get, so that if it doesn't work out at the public school, you got a safe thing at that. That for me is completely the other way around. I would imagine you're trying to get into this elite school and it doesn't work out, and then I'll just go to the local state school. But it's the other way. It's like the private school is your backup. Okay, so in the UK, you say I'm going to go to public high school. You would go to 3 probably different ones, and you would go to their open day. And then they would say, we would offer you a place if you get these grades. And then you would choose, oh, well, I got the grades and I got accepted to all 3. I can go to that one, or I can go to that one, I can go to that one. But here, you're restricted to only one public school. And if you don't get it, you have to go to private, or you have to go to that weird, I'm out of the cycle school and I'm going to try again next year. Right? That's quite different, right? I mean, Danny, you're the educator. You should
Whoa. And by the way, I want to interrupt and say I've realized maybe 10 years ago that if I want to cry on an airplane watching a movie, I'm going to do it. And so if I'm listening to your first episode, walking around O'Hori Park, and I feel the emotions, I'm going to cry. When your kid got that package from his classmates,
Right.
Oh, dude, the waterworks just started coming out, like, because I could feel that. That was good. That was good.
Yeah. No, that was a big moment in his core memory bank. You know, that was a good one.
And how's the friendship group now? It's been a year and a half, 2 years.
Yeah, I mean they're a little bit more apart, even though they still go to the same school, but you know, different classes, and there's like 40 kids in each class. There's just, they make friends fast, right, kids?
But what was the emotion of the dad getting that? Did you know it was coming?
Did I? I think I might have known. Yeah, I'm not sure, but
go back to episode 16 to figure out what I'm talking about here. But no, that was good.
That was good. I felt that was a good moment for sure, for him and for me too, and just made me realize that it was a good choice to go to Canada and take my kid there and have an experience that he wouldn't have had otherwise.
And I think what resonated with me on that was bringing our kid here, right? And like I said, he was like, I speak English. I don't want to be here. And then he had no friends. And then he was being like an asshole at the park. I'm like, dude, you're Johnny No Mates, man, because you're not being nice. And I'm like, I better catch myself because he really doesn't have any friends. And I'm making fun of him. And to hear your kid go through that experience and then you question yourself as a dad, am I doing the right thing? I'm like, am I doing the right thing? He could have stayed. I hated my job, but I could have stayed. And now, he's got so many friends, and you're like, I made the right decision.
Yep.
And so maybe that hit me at the point where I'm like, did I make the right decision? And to hear that at a point where I was struggling with, did we make the right decision?
Yeah.
Wow. Like, it took us a year. We were like, and then again, back to the education point, he's got a really good teacher right now. And I never really thought it impacted, because the kids will be kids. They're all gonna turn out fine. But then when you get a good one, you're like, oh, it does matter.
It does matter. It totally does.
Yeah. But that's not to say you can't have some great teachers in the public system as well.
No, for sure.
I mean, I will share a little bit, because I think, and obviously it's a while ago, but I've done both. Having moved, not internationally, but in the UK about every 4 years moving. If the public school, the state school was good quality, the local one, then me and my brothers would go there. But sometimes we actually got pulled out of one school because it just was not going well. Then we would go into the private school of that area. So I saw both sides and had great teachers at both, had not so great teachers at both, had good friends and not so good friends. And obviously facilities wise, like one of the places I went to was proper like Harry Potter style. I mean, assemblies in the cathedral every morning. I mean, that is just something, I don't think it's, that made me the person I am, but to have had that experience is like pretty cool. But again, I don't think my kids are going to go to assembly in a cathedral. God, how are they going to turn out? I mean, that's not that big a deal, right? Or, they don't have 5 rugby pitches and, all this kind of stuff. But what I would definitely say is where I am just sort of, I'm not some exceptional academic smart guy. I'm not exceptional at sports. When I was at those private schools, I was such a small little fish, because I might get on the C cricket team, never the B or the A. And, my grades were kind of like, okay. And the cool kids and stuff, I was like, yeah, okay. Whereas I could really stand out a bit more when I was in like the state schools because, I was a little bit smarter than the average. I was a little bit better at sport than the average. I was a little bit more social than the average. So for me, it was nicer to be in a big fish in a small pond than a small fish in a...
Sure.
Well, which way around is it? You know what I mean, though, right? Right.
Yeah.
So I definitely think that's an important point. Like, sure, if you're going to be the number one at Eton or Harvard or whatever, fantastic. But the majority of people there are not.
Sure.
Whereas if you're at some more honest cut through of society, you're going to shine a little bit more, I think.
Yeah.
And that's important as a kid, man.
Sure,
like the whole friends thing and stuff like that. Like,
the confidence.
Yeah.
The confidence. Definitely.
And having those opportunities, like, oh, look at these fantastic facilities, but I don't get to use them because I'm not good enough to be on that team. Whereas, oh no, like I'm in the team and we won the championship. Yeah, that's an amazing feeling, So, you got to think about that, I think.
Yeah. I mean, I've met some really well-rounded international students, and that grew up to be good adults. And one of our guests, Jamie. Yeah, right. I'm not sure what school he went to, but he grew up in England though, didn't he? Yeah.
But I don't know if he went private or public. I don't know.
Yeah.
The young guy you guys had on.
Yeah.
See, I remember.
Yeah.
No, but all right, go back to the episodes. You guys can splice in the episodes.
That's
for which
pretty good.
one? Because I'm gonna plug a lot of them. But another one that really, really hit me was you telling him on the boat about your mom. And I was like, I've been there. I lost my dad when I was in Japan, 30 years ago, 25 years ago. And it hurts. You don't know what's going on. And to hear your experience of going through that, I appreciate you sharing that. And I watched your video last night and I was like, that's good. I'm glad you do that. But to me, having, I lost my dad when I was younger, right? 20s. It prepared me to be a better friend when my friends went through it.
Right.
And so to hear you kind of share that vibe of not seeing each other for a long time, I was like, oh yeah, I've been there. I've seen it. I've been there with friends as they're going through it, and now, it's funny how I've talked to a couple of guys of mine that are a little older than mine, of me. I'm like, it went real fast from like grandparents to parents to friends when you lose them. And I was like, oh, so yeah, when I was walking around O'Horry Park and listening to that, I was like, yeah, I can feel that emotion on that 15-minute boat ride. You guys were on.
Yeah.
I was like, good for you guys. And so, yeah, I watched that video and again, it's people doing things they normally wouldn't do and celebrating it. So I appreciate you doing that.
Awesome. Thanks again for sharing. I appreciate that.
I got more. I can keep going. I can keep going.
You got me in my feels, man.
So, Danny, it's so good to hear that your son's turned it around and got a great bunch of friends and things like that. How about yourself? How are you finding getting your life going here?
Yeah, that's a good question. Thank you for that. I also don't know. Yeah, 50 years old. I'm like, hey, man, I had a great career. I was in an industry. I knew everybody. I knew, I made a lot of connections, and then decided, hey, I'd rather be a dad. And I'm done. I don't want to do this anymore. And thankfully, my wife was fantastic about it. And she's like, yeah, let's go. And so I was like, hey, let's take a year, take 2 years. I think the original goal was a year. But then I was like, look, the hiring cycle, if I wanted to find another job, I'd have to start looking in 6 months.
Mhm.
I'm like, that's not long enough. Now it's been 18 months. We missed the second cycle, and now it's done. Like I'm not doing it. And
Mhm.
then I think it was such a great time. Like we're gonna get on a little tangent here. Of
Yeah,
like,
sure.
about how I grew up, right? Like I grew up, I didn't have a computer. Then I got a computer, and Microsoft, like Word was terrible. And then they started adding features and adding features, adding features, adding features. And as we grow up, the features grow, right? Now kids open up Office and they're like, what is going on here? Whereas we grew up through every iteration of more and more options of like, oh, now we can do mail merge. Okay, great. Oh, Excel, look at what Excel can do. And now we're at the AI, and I'm like, oh, I just had a year and a half where I wasn't working. I could study AI and figure out what AI does. And I feel so fortunate to be in that situation where I was like, wait, this just took off, and I didn't have to report to my boss to figure out what was going on. And so professionally, intellectually, I have learned more in the last year than I probably did in the last, 10 years.
Wow.
And that has been very, very rewarding for me.
Right.
Socially, whatever, right? Like I'm 50. What do you want me to do, right?
But yeah, I mean, we did want to find out a bit more about you, I think.
Yes.
So
Yes.
just tell us a bit more. The product would be sending. I'm assuming, would it be people here from Japan abroad to study? Or?
It's so I work with international schools,
Right.
and it's not even about who the school is. It's going to be schools all around the world.
Right.
Of
right.
like, hey, you're sending kids overseas, and here, and even my brother's school in the States, they're sending kids to Cuba, and I was like, all right, send me the risk assessment. Like I didn't get anything, but I was like, hey man, that's not good enough, right? But yeah, so basically, I'm trying to develop a software that collects the itinerary, whatever form, because you work with 20 different trip providers. Take that, throw it into the system, and the system puts it into a way that the administrator at the school knows exactly where every kid is at all times.
Okay.
And then at a click of a button, they know, all right, here's the Google thing. Here's all the Google information. Here's the hospital that's closest if there's an incident. Here are the potential incidents that could happen. And here are the risk mitigations that could happen.
So it's
those
like
sort of things.
creating the ultimate manager for everybody. Am I on
Like
the
a
right
trip
track?
manager, I
Trip
wouldn't
man.
say.
Oh, it's a trip man. Okay. All
Yeah,
right.
yeah. So it's sort of like, you take the teacher who's been teaching class all day, and then, they're teaching all day Thursday. Thursday night they get an airplane. They come here because my friends will be here next weekend, and they're in charge of a trip. We're working with another trip provider from Oita down the road, and they'll go to a bunch of different places here in Kyushu, and then get back on the plane and fly back to Singapore. And the school needs, for a number of reasons, a bunch of information about what those kids will be doing. And so the trip providers have it, don't have it, they give it to you in different formats. And so having one format where the boss can say, okay, we have 20 trips, we have 50 trips of kids all around the world right now. What are the most like risky activities that the kids could be on? They could be scuba diving in Australia. They could be surfing in Bali. They could be in, safari in South Africa. And so if they're in safari in South Africa, something happens. The boss needs to know what's the closest hospital.
I'm just curious, Danny, again, like your side of things. Were you quite involved in those trips when you were in that industry? So you've seen what's needed then?
So my job the last 10 years was to oversee 1,000 kids traveling every year and dealing with all the logistics and all the finances and all the risks and all these kinds of things. And so, and schools, like everything, right? Like you and teachers too, right? You're hired to do a particular job, and then all of a sudden, this week of trips comes along. The teacher is like, "Hey, dude, I'm not prepared for this. I'm not sleeping on the side of a mountain in the ball. I'm an English teacher. I'm trained as an English teacher." And so, then the boss is like, "I got emails from the PTA. I got emails. I like make this go away." And so for a lot of time, like I felt I was doing a good job at my job of making the stress go away, just make it go away.
Yeah. No, I
That's
can
cool.
say, yeah. And when do you think you'll be ready to launch this?
Man, yeah.
Work in progress.
It's like, okay, you guys own businesses.
Yeah.
And you have families.
Yeah.
How do you make the decision of which is right? Like,
Yeah.
where should I be right now?
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people that are in
Yeah.
the chat are in a similar situation of
Yeah.
how do we make that decision? Like, I have thought the last couple of weeks I've made so much progress that I'm like, hey, honey, I need to like get into the radio room here for a week and just leave me there with the computer. I'll sleep. I'll Red Bull. I'm gonna knock this out.
Yeah.
But then I don't want to do that.
Life gets in the way too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Make your kids lunch, or do the laundry.
Yeah. I mean, I think two things. Some advice that I had from a listener was, this is about. I was having this thing like, I don't think I've got enough money to have kids. Like I need to wait a little bit till my career's got a bit better, and then I'll have kids. And the advice was, if you wait like that, wait to have enough money, you're never gonna have kids.
Yeah.
You basically start having kids, and you find a way to make enough money for them. And then on the flip side, what kind of connected to that was the decision of like, right, we have a business and we're going to have kids. My wife and I very clearly said, we know that the business will take a hit for this. It will not be able to grow as quickly. If it is growing as quickly as we could do if we didn't have kids, we're clearly not doing very well with our kids, right? Because it is going to take some time. But the view there was those early years. I mean, firstly, the first years, you're keeping your child alive. They're not going to survive without you. So you've got to be there. And then after that, the years that we're kind of all in now, those are those most precious years that you cannot get back. And it will be coming from them pretty soon of like I just had a whole day with my daughter. She was delighted to do that. Next year after that, hey, it's Sunday. What do you want to do? You want to do something with Daddy? No. And that's natural. She should want to be with her friends by that point. So by that point, I'm then thinking, well, I'm still going to be late 40s. I'm not retiring anytime soon. I can put more energy back into the business and grow it then. So as long as it doesn't collapse, it's okay to sort of let the foot off the pedal for a little bit while the kids are young, do that parental stuff right, and then and grow the business later. So, but not starting it maybe is not. It's good to have it started. Maybe I think. Because it does take a lot of energy to start something, right? So we've been doing this really in a sort of, I don't know, bubble. Really, we don't really know whether anyone's listening or not. Like,
well, we do now. Thank you, Dan.
But at that point, I didn't really know. And then meeting you and sort of feeling like I'm trying to tell you something like, I already know it because I've heard it. I'm like, wow, this is weird. You know about me, but I haven't really talked to you. It's like that was quite interesting. Yeah. A weird moment.
I don't know if we really touched on exactly what happened, right? So I had a friend in town, and I never have friends, and so I was at the Hippo, and finished up a couple of beers. You rocked in, and I just met you a couple of weeks earlier.
Yeah, at the play group, right?
And that's when you were telling me about the podcast. Another guy with a podcast, and so it was good. I was like, oh, yeah, it was good.
Yeah.
I appreciate what you guys do.
Thank you, Don. Thank you.